Have you ever found yourself lying awake at night, replaying the same conversation over and over in your mind? Or have you ever caught yourself turning a simple decision into a mental maze that never ends? If so, you're not alone, and today we're going to explore exactly why certain minds refuse to stop thinking, analyzing, and worrying. The psychology of people who overanalyze every situation reveals something powerful about how the brain perceives uncertainty, control, and safety. Imagine your brain is like a security system, not just to protect your home, but to protect you from threats, mistakes, embarrassment, rejection, and failure. For most people, this system alerts them when something genuinely needs attention and then goes back into standby mode. But for people who overanalyze, that system never shuts off. Every detail is scanned repeatedly for danger that might not even be there. So let's break down what's happening psychologically when someone overanalyzes. First, fear of uncertainty is one of the biggest drivers. The human brain has an incredible distaste for not knowing. Evolution shaped us to stay alive by predicting what might happen next. Will the tiger attack? Is the ground safe? Nowadays, we don't face predators or wilderness threats, but our brain still craves certainty. When we can't predict what will happen, especially socially, we spin scenarios to try to create clarity. Every conversation, every email, every slight change in tone becomes data our brain insists it must decode perfectly. But here's the catch, the brain can't actually control the future, it can only estimate it. So when someone overanalyzes, their brain treats uncertainty like a threat instead of a normal part of life. The result? Constant mental replaying of events, trying to extract meaning or prevent imagined negative outcomes. Next, many people who overanalyze are driven by fear of making mistakes or being judged. This isn't about trying to do well, it's about avoiding negative evaluation. When someone overthinks, they often imagine worst-case scenarios. Even when nothing indicates that those scenarios are likely, they play every possibility through their head as if preparing for battle. The problem is, while this might feel like preparation, it's really mental rumination, and rumination keeps the nervous system in a state of alertness, which prevents rest and clarity. We can also look at perfectionism. People who overanalyze often want to make the perfect choice. They fear that one wrong decision will have catastrophic consequences. So instead of making a choice and moving forward, they dwell in analysis and doubt. They scrutinize every angle, every option, every little detail, all in the belief that more thinking equals better decision. But in reality, too much thinking creates noise, not clarity. At some point, the brain stops distinguishing between helpful information and mental clutter. Another psychological mechanism at play for overthinkers is conditioning from past experiences. If someone has been criticized, rejected, punished, or unexpectedly blindsided in the past, their brain learns to be hypervigilant. Every new social interaction becomes a potential threat, and the brain goes into full analysis mode to try to prevent another painful outcome. In essence, the person's nervous system is trying to protect them by scanning for danger, almost like an internal early warning system. But when that system is always active, the person never gets a break. This constant internal monitoring comes with high emotional weight. When we overthink, we don't just think, we feel each potential outcome. The emotional brain, the amygdala, reacts to imagined scenarios as if they are real. So every imagined mistake feels like a real emotional threat. The cognitive brain, thinking part, and emotional brain become stuck in a loop. Thoughts trigger feelings, and feelings reinforce more thoughts. This loop is one of the main reasons why people who overanalyze can't rest. Even when the body is physically tired, the mind remains alert, anticipating what could go wrong. Sleep becomes disrupted because the brain sees nighttime not as rest, but as unsolved problems waiting to be examined again. There's also an identity component tied to overanalyzing. Some people believe that their worth comes from thinking deeply, being in control, or being prepared for every outcome. Overanalyzing then becomes part of their identity. I am the kind of person who thinks ahead, sees everything, and protects myself. While self-awareness and careful thought can be strengths, when they become compulsive and never turn off, they become obstacles, not assets. So how does the brain justify all this overanalysis? Neuropsychology gives us one clue: the brain's prediction system. The brain constantly predicts what will happen next. That's how we move, react, and interact. In healthy functioning, prediction helps us respond quickly and appropriately. But for overthinkers, prediction becomes overprediction, imagining dozens of variations of how one scenario could unfold. The brain tries to minimize surprise or error. But in doing so, it creates extra scenarios that don't need to be solved, yet the brain insists they must be. Now, let's talk about consequences. When someone overanalyzes, their quality of life can suffer in hidden ways. Relationships can become strained. A partner might feel like nothing is ever okay or enough. Decisions that should take minutes take hours, days, or even weeks. Stress hormones like cortisol remain elevated because the body stays in alert mode. Anxiety takes root. Sleep becomes lighter. Confidence erodes. Here's something crucial: overanalyzing doesn't mean someone is smarter than others. In fact, it often means the brain is stuck in a feedback loop where thinking becomes an anxiety management strategy, not a problem-solving tool. Instead of asking what is most likely, the brain asks what is worst that could happen. Every possibility gets equal weight, even improbable ones. Breaking out of this mindset doesn't happen overnight. But understanding the psychology behind overanalysis is the first step. Once someone realizes that their brain is trying to protect them, they can begin to heal. They can learn to differentiate between productive thought and rumination. They can practice grounding themselves in what is, rather than what might be. They can retrain their brain to tolerate uncertainty, because life, by nature, is uncertain. And here's the key insight: uncertainty does not equal danger. It may feel uncomfortable, but discomfort isn't a threat. The brain learns through experience. If a person can sit with uncertainty without catastrophic thinking, the brain's threat response begins to calm down. With time, the urge to overanalyze begins to diminish. So why don't some brains rest? Because they are stuck in survival mode, scanning, evaluating, predicting, protecting. But what if rest isn't something to earn through analysis? What if it's something to accept through presence? What if the mind is trained not to solve every possibility, but to respond to reality as it unfolds? This shift, from analyzing to accepting uncertainty, is what brings peace. Not avoidance. Not denial. But awareness without overinterpretation. If you find yourself analyzing every situation, remember this: your mind isn't trying to sabotage you, it's trying to keep you safe. But safety doesn't come from predicting every possible outcome, it comes from learning you can handle life as it comes.